Are you also tired and sleeping? Those were the last words spoken before the impossible happened. Before monitors that had flatlined for 18 months suddenly exploded with activity. Before a father's prayers were answered by the smallest, most unexpected miracle. Before a feverish child lying on a billionaire's chest did what $12 million in medical care could not do. She brought him back from the dead. If you have ever watched someone you love slip away, if you have ever held on to hope when every expert told you to let go, if you have ever wondered whether love is stronger than science, then you need to hear what happened in that sunroom. Because what you are about to witness will challenge everything you think you know about life, death, and the mysterious power of human connection. This is not a story about medicine. This is not a story about wealth. This is a story about a mother's impossible choice, a child's innocent heart, and a man suspended between two worlds who needed something doctors could not prescribe. Something pure, something warm, something alive. If you believe miracles happen in the most unexpected ways, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will shake you, it will move you, and by the end, it will change how you see the power of simply being present for another human being. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the silence, to the waiting, to the slow death of hope in a mansion that had forgotten how to breathe. The Ashford estate sat on 40 acres of manicured perfection overlooking Crystal Lake, 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a ballroom that had hosted governors and tech giants and celebrity philanthropists, gardens that required a full-time staff of 6, a wine cellar worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. But for 18 months, all that beauty had meant nothing, because the heart of the estate, its very soul, lay motionless in a converted sunroom, kept alive by machines that breathed for him and fed him and sustained the shell of what he used to be. Vincent Ashford had been a god in his world. At 38, he had revolutionized communication technology across 3 continents. His company had made video calls feel like being in the same room, had connected families separated by oceans, had brought medical care to remote villages through telemedicine platforms. He had built an empire on the simple belief that distance should not mean disconnection. The irony was crushing. The man who had connected millions now lay disconnected from everything. From his company, from his father, from his own body, from life itself. The boating accident had happened on a perfect August afternoon. Vincent had been testing a new yacht design with 3 colleagues. Witnesses said the explosion came without warning. Fire and smoke and the terrible sound of fiberglass shattering. 2 of the men died instantly. 1 walked away with burns and trauma that still woke him screaming. And Vincent had been pulled from the water with a pulse so faint the paramedics almost missed it. Brain trauma from impact, oxygen deprivation, damage so severe that the first neurologist to see his scans had actually gasped. But Vincent Ashford did not die that day. His body had other plans, plans no one understood. It kept fighting, kept breathing with help, kept existing in that terrible space between life and death where hope goes to suffer. For the first 6 months, the specialists had been cautiously optimistic. Induced coma, they said. Giving the brain time to heal, they said. But 6 months became 9. 9 became 12. And the optimism died quietly, replaced by professional distance and carefully worded prognoses that all meant the same thing. He is gone. The body just does not know it yet. Dr. Patricia Morrison had been the one to finally say it out loud. She was the country's leading neurologist, the expert other experts called when they had run out of answers. She had flown in from Johns Hopkins, spent 3 days reviewing every scan, every test, every measurement of brain activity. And then she had sat down with Richard Ashford in the library and delivered the truth with clinical gentleness. The brain activity is minimal, she had said, her hands folded on the mahogany desk, her eyes tired from too many cases like this. Responses are virtually non-existent. We have exhausted every intervention, experimental treatments, stem cell therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, electrical stimulation. Nothing has produced meaningful change. Richard had not looked at her. He had stared at the window, at the gardens his son used to walk through every morning before dawn, coffee in hand, mind already racing with the day's innovations. "What are you telling me?" he had asked, though he already knew, had known for months, but refused to accept. Dr. Morrison had taken a slow breath. "I am telling you that your son, the person Vincent was, is gone. The neural pathways that made him who he was have been too damaged for too long. What remains is basic autonomic function maintained by machines. And she had paused here, choosing her next words with the weight they deserved. It is time to consider letting him go with dignity. Richard Ashford had not responded, could not respond, because accepting those words meant accepting that the brilliant, stubborn boy who had argued philosophy at 12 and built his first successful startup at 19 no longer existed. That the man who had changed the world before 40 would never change anything again. That he had already attended his son's funeral. He just had not buried the body yet. But Richard could not let go, would not. Every morning he sat in that uncomfortable chair beside the hospital bed, reading aloud from technology journals, market reports, anything he thought might penetrate the darkness. His voice would crack sometimes, especially when reading about innovations in Vincent's own company. Breakthroughs his son should have been leading, but would never witness. The business partners had stopped coming after the first year. The initial flood of concerned visitors had slowed to a trickle, then dried up completely. People had lives to live, companies to run, families that actually recognized them. Grief tourism only sustained itself for so long before even the most devoted friends had to move forward. The mansion reflected the abandonment. The ballroom stayed dark. The formal dining room gathered dust. The kitchen staff had been reduced from 4 to 1 because who needed elaborate meals when the only person home ate through a feeding tube and could not taste anything anyway? The estate had become a mausoleum for someone not yet buried, a monument to hope that was slowly calcifying into despair. And in the middle of it all, keeping the fading flame of care alive, was Nadia Okonkwo. She remembered with perfect clarity the day Vincent Ashford had changed her life. 2 years before the accident, back when the mansion had been alive with energy and purpose and Vincent's infectious laugh echoing through its halls. She had arrived for what she assumed was a housekeeping interview, wearing her only professional outfit, carrying recommendations from the small domestic positions she had held while raising her daughter alone. The estate manager, a severe woman named Constance, had looked Nadia up and down with an expression that communicated everything without words. "We do not hire your kind here." The pause before she had spoken had been loaded with implications that made Nadia's spine stiffen. "Mr. Ashford does not typically hire," Constance had said. And that pause again. "Your type." Nadia had been preparing to leave, dignity intact but hope crushed. When Vincent had appeared, he had that energy about him, that particular intensity of brilliant people who see the world 3 moves ahead of everyone else. He had dismissed Constance with a curt wave that made the estate manager's face go tight with disapproval. Then he had sat across from Nadia in the sunroom, the same sunroom that now housed his comatose body. The irony was not lost on her, and he had asked her a single question. "Why do you need this job?" Not about her experience, not about her qualifications, just that, "Why do you need this job?" And Nadia, tired of pretending, tired of carefully constructed answers designed to make employers comfortable, had told him the truth. "My daughter," she had said. "She is 3. I need to provide for her, give her stability, a future. I am weeks away from eviction. I have medical debt from her birth that follows me everywhere. I am a good worker. I am reliable. I just need someone to give me a chance." Vincent had hired her on the spot, not just hired her. He had offered her the cottage on the estate grounds, a small but beautiful 2-bedroom structure near the gardens where she and Amara could live rent-free. "Everyone deserves a chance to build something," he had said, "especially parents trying to give their children better than they had." That kindness had saved Nadia's life. Quite literally, she had been drowning, going under, no family to catch her, no safety net to break the fall. And Vincent Ashford, billionaire, tech genius, man who could have hired anyone, had thrown her a lifeline. Now, caring for him felt like the only way to repay an unpayable debt. Every morning she entered the medical wing at 6. She checked the machines first, making sure all the numbers fell within the ranges Dr. Morrison's team had specified. She adjusted Vincent's position carefully, preventing the bed sores that could develop from immobility. She kept the room clean, the temperature comfortable, the blinds open so natural light could fill the space. And she talked to him, even though he could not hear, even though 18 months had passed without the slightest flicker of response. She told him about his father's unwavering presence, about the gardens blooming outside, about small things, human things, anything that might impossibly reach him wherever he was. Sometimes she wondered if he was still in there, trapped, aware but unable to signal. The thought made her stomach turn. So she chose to believe he was at peace somewhere, resting, waiting for whatever came next. She had no idea that what came next would arrive in the form of her own daughter. Feverish, wandering, innocent enough to see what no one else could see. Have you ever faced a choice where every option felt wrong? Where keeping your job meant risking your child, but losing your job meant losing everything? Drop a comment and share your story, because what you are about to hear is about a mother backed into an impossible corner, forced to make a decision that would change not just her life, but the life of the man she had spent 18 months caring for. The morning everything changed began like any other. Nadia woke at 5:30, her internal clock no longer needing an alarm. She rose quietly, careful not to wake Amara in the small bedroom they shared. But when she walked to her daughter's bed to check on her before heading to the main house, her hand touched skin that was burning. Amara's face was flushed, her breathing quick and shallow. Even in sleep her body trembled, fighting something Nadia could not see. Panic seized Nadia's throat, familiar and terrible. She had lost her own mother to an illness that had started with simple fever, had watched infection take her in less than a week because they had waited too long to seek care, had promised herself she would never make that mistake with her own child. She pressed her palm to Amara's forehead and felt heat that made her heart race. This was not a mild fever. This was serious. This needed medical attention. But it was 5:45 on a Tuesday morning. The nearest urgent care did not open until 8. The hospital was 40 minutes away, and Nadia was supposed to be at the main house in 15 minutes to begin Vincent's morning routine. Richard Ashford had become increasingly volatile since Dr. Morrison's prognosis. 2 staff members had been fired in the past month for infractions Nadia considered minor. Missing a shift without notice would be considered grounds for immediate dismissal. If she lost this job, she lost the cottage, lost the stability, lost everything she had spent 2 years building. But if she left Amara alone, sick and frightened, and something happened, she could not finish the thought. The idea was unbearable. For 20 agonizing minutes, Nadia weighed impossible choices. Take Amara to the hospital and face termination, leave her daughter alone in the cottage, burning with fever, and hate herself forever. Or, the idea that came to her was reckless, dangerous to her employment. But maternal desperation has a way of overriding logic and fear and common sense. The medical wing had a small preparation room adjacent to Vincent's sunroom, a space where Nadia organized supplies, folded linens, prepared the daily care items. It was quiet, it was warm, and most importantly, it was where Nadia would be anyway. She could bring Amara there, hide her, check on her constantly while completing her duties. The child was sick. She would sleep. And once Nadia finished the morning routine, she could take her daughter to urgent care when it opened. It was not a good plan, but it was the only plan she had. Nadia wrapped Amara carefully in soft blankets, the child's teeth chattering despite the warmth. "Mama," Amara whispered, her voice small and scared. "I do not feel good." "I know, baby." Nadia pressed her lips to her daughter's burning forehead. "Mama is going to take care of you, but I need you to be very brave and very quiet. Can you do that for me?" Amara nodded weakly, her trust absolute in the way only a child's can be. "Okay, Mama." The walk from the cottage to the main house felt like a mile instead of 200 yards. Dawn was just breaking, the estate still quiet. Nadia held Amara close, whispering reassurances, praying they would not encounter anyone. Richard often walked the grounds early, insomnia having claimed his nights since Vincent's accident. If he saw her, she pushed the thought away. They made it to the medical wing without incident. Nadia slipped into the preparation room and created a nest of folded linens in the corner farthest from the door. A makeshift bed that was at least warm and soft and safe. "Stay here, my love," Nadia murmured, tucking the blankets around Amara's trembling form. "Mama will be right in the next room. I will check on you every few minutes. Try to sleep, okay?" Amara's response was barely audible, her energy depleted by fever. "Okay." Nadia's heart shattered as she looked at her daughter. So small and vulnerable. But she had no choice. She left the door cracked, just enough that she could hear if Amara called for her. Then she stepped into Vincent's sunroom to begin the morning routine. Check the monitors, adjust his position, change the forebag. The familiar tasks steadied her shaking hands. She worked efficiently, glancing toward the preparation room every few seconds, listening for any sound from her daughter. She did not know that fever dreams can give children a strange, wandering kind of courage. That discomfort can override instruction. That curiosity can pull a sick child towards sounds that seem musical in a fevered mind. Amara tried to be still, tried to be good, like Mama asked, but the fever made everything feel wrong. Her skin felt too tight, her head too heavy. The blankets that had seemed comforting became suffocating, making it hard to breathe. She pushed at them weakly, her small hands tangling in the fabric as she kicked free. That was when she heard it. Beep, beep, beep. A steady rhythm coming from somewhere beyond the partially open door. In her fever-clouded mind, it sounded almost musical, like the lullabies Mama sometimes hummed when tucking her in, like a heartbeat, like something calling her, curious, uncomfortable, seeking relief she could not name. Amara crawled free of her nest. The world tilted strangely when she stood. The floor seemed to move beneath her bare feet. She held the wall for balance, her small hand leaving a damp print on the pale paint. Step by uncertain step, she followed the beeping sound, through the doorway, into the sunroom, where Vincent Ashford had lain motionless for 18 months. To the medical staff who monitored him, to his father who sat vigil daily, to anyone who had seen him these past months, Vincent looked like a figure from tragic sculpture, beautiful in the way classical death masks are beautiful, still, perfect, lifeless. But to Amara, delirious with fever and innocent of death's possibilities, he simply looked like someone else who was tired. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the hospital bed. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, and there, in the center of it all, was a man who looked peaceful, resting, just like her. "Are you sleeping too?" she whispered, her voice carrying that particular gentleness children use with sleeping things. He did not answer. But that was okay. Mama did not always answer either when she was very tired. The bed was high, much higher than Amara's bed at home, but she had learned to climb into Mama's bed when nightmares came, and this seemed important somehow, like something she needed to do, even though she could not explain why. She grabbed the edge of the mattress, pulled. Her arms trembled with effort and fever, but she managed to get one knee up, then the other. The climb felt like it took forever, her small body weak and burning. But she made it. Vincent lay on his back, his chest still, his face peaceful in its emptiness. Tubes and wires connected him to machines Amara did not understand. But none of that mattered to her. She just saw someone who looked lonely, someone who, like her, needed rest. She crawled carefully across the bed, her movements slow and deliberate. When she reached his side, she curled against him, her burning cheek pressing against the cool cotton of his hospital gown. Her small hand came to rest over his heart, feeling for the heartbeat she could not find. "I will stay with you," she murmured, her words already slurring toward sleep. "So, you are not alone." The fever pulled at her, dragging her down into exhausted unconsciousness. Within moments, her breathing deepened, her tiny body, radiating the intense heat of illness, pressed close to Vincent's still form. Her heartbeat, quick and strong with the resilience of childhood, pulsed rhythmically against his silent chest. In the preparation room, Nadia had just finished folding the last of the clean linens when she realized the silence was wrong. She could not hear Amara, no restless shifting, no feverish mumbling, just quiet, too quiet. Her stomach dropped. She stepped quickly to the corner where she had left her daughter and found the nest of blankets empty. "No." The word came out as a breath of pure panic. "No, no, no, Amara." She spun toward the door, toward the sunroom, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. And then she heard it, a change in the familiar beeping pattern of Vincent's monitors. Something faster, something irregular, something wrong. Nadia rushed into the sunroom and froze. There, curled on Vincent Ashford's chest, was her daughter, sleeping peacefully, her small form rising and falling with breaths that seemed synchronized to his. Her dark curls spread across his hospital gown, her hand resting directly over his heart. The terror that seized Nadia was absolute. If Richard found them, if the doctors saw this, her job, Their home, everything gone in an instant. She lunged forward, mouth opening to call Amara's name, but before she could speak, the door burst open. Richard Ashford stood in the doorway, having come for his morning vigil. His eyes found the child on his son's chest, found Nadia frozen mid-step, and his face transformed into something Nadia had never seen before. Not anger, not confusion, but shock so complete it rendered him speechless. Behind him, Dr. Morrison appeared, having arrived for a routine observation. She had been consulting with Richard in the hallway when they both heard the monitors change rhythm. Now her eyes went to the screens beside Vincent's bed, and her expression shifted from professional calm to something close to disbelief. "Patricia," Richard whispered, his voice strange and tight. "Patricia, what is happening?" Dr. Morrison moved to the monitors, as if pulled by invisible strings. Her hands trembled as she leaned close to read the numbers. The brain activity monitor, which had shown minimal flatline readings for 18 months, was spiking. Small fluctuations at first, then increasingly pronounced. The EEG waves that had been barely distinguishable from baseline were suddenly active, alive. The heart rate monitor, which had maintained the same mechanical rhythm for so long it had become background noise, was showing variability, responding, adjusting, behaving like a heart that was receiving signals from a brain that was waking up. Oxygen saturation rising, blood pressure normalizing, respiratory rate increasing independently of the ventilator. "This is not possible," Dr. Morrison breathed. "The neural damage was too extensive. He should not. He cannot." And then, as four people watched in absolute silence, Vincent Ashford's fingers moved, not the involuntary twitch they had seen occasionally, not a muscle spasm or automatic reflex, actual movement, purposeful, controlled. His right hand shifted on the bed, muscles responding to signals from a brain everyone had declared beyond recovery. Richard made a sound halfway between a sob and a prayer. His hand went to his mouth, as if to hold back the hope that was too fragile, too impossible to trust. On Vincent's chest, Amara slept on, oblivious to the miracle she was somehow creating, her fevered warmth radiating against him, her heartbeat pressing insistently against his silent one, her small body a beacon of life touching death and refusing to accept the boundary between them. The machines continued their changing song. Beep, 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 beep. Faster now, stronger. Vincent's chest rose in a deep breath. The ventilator registered the change, confused by lungs that were suddenly trying to breathe on their own. His eyelids fluttered. Once, twice. Movement behind them visible for the first time in a year and a half. Dr. Morrison stumbled backward, her scientific mind fracturing under the weight of what she was witnessing. In 30 years of neurology, in hundreds of coma cases, she had never seen anything like this. Had read about spontaneous recoveries, but always attributed them to misdiagnosis or incomplete data. But this was undeniable. If this moment gave you chills, smash that like button right now, because what happens next defies every medical textbook ever written. Stay with me. Vincent's eyes opened slowly, confused, unfocused, pupils contracting against light they had not processed in 18 months. His gaze drifted across the ceiling, processing shapes and shadows, before settling on the small weight on his chest. He saw Amara's sleeping face, felt her fevered warmth, her heartbeat against his own. Some deep, primal part of his brain registered the presence of a child, vulnerable, sick, needing protection. His hand rose with enormous effort, every muscle atrophied from disuse, every nerve pathway struggling to remember how to send signals. But the hand rose, trembling, until it came to rest gently on Amara's back. Some instinct, some deeply human recognition of the fragile life pressed against his own, guided the gesture. "What?" The word came out as barely a rasp, his vocal cords damaged from the ventilator tube, from months of silence. But it was his voice, real, present, alive. Dr. Morrison's hands went to her stethoscope with shaking fingers. "This is impossible," she said again, as if repetition would make it comprehensible. "There is no medical precedent. The neural damage was catastrophic. He should not be conscious. He cannot be conscious. But he is." Richard collapsed into the chair he had occupied for so many hopeless months, 18 months of vigil. 18 months of one-sided conversations and prayers that echoed unanswered. 18 months of watching his son exist without living, and now, the sobs that came from him were primal. Relief and disbelief and overwhelming gratitude pouring out in waves that shook his entire body. He reached for Vincent's free hand, the one not resting on Amara, and gripped it with both of his own. "Vincent," he choked out. "Son, can you hear me?" Vincent's eyes moved slowly, searching for the source of the voice. Recognition flickered in them. Confusion. Questions he did not have the strength to ask, but awareness. Undeniable, impossible awareness. On his chest, Amara stirred slightly, her fever making her restless even in sleep. Vincent's hand pressed gently against her back, a gesture of comfort that came from somewhere beyond conscious thought. "She is burning up," Vincent whispered, each word clearly requiring enormous effort, his concern for the child unmistakable even in his weakened state. And in that moment, Nadia remembered how to move. She stepped forward, her own eyes streaming with tears she did not understand, tears of relief that Vincent was awake, tears of terror for what this meant, tears of awe at what her daughter had somehow done. "Fever," Nadia managed, her voice breaking. "She has a fever. I am so sorry, Mr. Ashford. I did not know where else to bring her. I was going to take her to urgent care. I never meant for her to disturb you. I am so sorry." Vincent's eyes found Nadia, recognition there too, the woman who had cared for him, who had talked to him in the silence, whose voice he had perhaps heard even in the darkness. "Get her medicine," Vincent said, the effort of speaking visibly exhausting him. Help her, not anger at the intrusion, not confusion about why a child was on his chest, just immediate concern for Amara's well-being. The same fundamental kindness that had led him to hire Nadia 2 years ago. The core of who he was, unchanged even by 18 months in the void. Dr. Morrison finally broke from her shock. "I need to examine him," she said, her voice unsteady. This will rewrite everything we know about coma recovery. Everything." As Nadia gently lifted Amara from Vincent's chest, the monitors showed his vitals dipping slightly, as if protesting the separation. The child stirred, but did not wake. Fever keeping her under, Nadia cradled her daughter against her chest, feeling the burning heat, the too quick heartbeat. Vincent's eyes tracked the movement, followed Amara even as Dr. Morrison began her examination, watched to make sure the child was being cared for. "What happened to me?" he whispered to his father, his hand squeezing Richard's with a grip that was weak but real. "Accident," Richard managed through tears. "Boating accident. 18 months ago. You have been. We thought we lost you. 18 months. The words seemed to hit Vincent like physical blows, confusion and grief and loss flickering across his face. 18 months gone. 18 months he would never get back. But Dr. Morrison was asking him questions now. "What is your name? What year is it? Who is the president?" Testing cognitive function, testing memory, testing whether the man who had woken up was the same man who had fallen into darkness. Vincent answered slowly, some responses correct, some confused, his long-term memory largely intact, his short-term memory ending abruptly on that August afternoon when fire had consumed the yacht. Everything after that, nothing, 18 months of nothing. The examination continued, neurological tests, motor function assessments, cognitive evaluations, and with each test, Dr. Morrison's expression shifted further from clinical professionalism towards something approaching wonder. "He should not be this responsive," she kept saying. "The damage we saw on the scans, the length of time unconscious. By every measure, he should be severely impaired if he woke at all. But he is nearly intact. Nearly, not fully." Vincent's motor control was compromised, his strength minimal, his stamina non-existent. Speaking exhausted him. Thinking clearly required enormous effort. He would need months of physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he was awake. He was aware. He was alive in a way he had not been for a year and a half. And as the medical team gathered, as specialists were called in from across the country, as the impossible recovery became the focus of intense scrutiny, one question dominated every conversation. Why now? Why, after 18 months of no progress, what had changed? The only variable anyone could identify was the child, the feverish 5-year-old who had crawled onto his chest and fallen asleep, whose warmth and heartbeat and living presence had somehow penetrated the darkness where Vincent had been trapped. Dr. Morrison had no scientific explanation. None of her colleagues did either. They theorized about thermal stimulation, about cardiac rhythms synchronizing, about the electromagnetic fields generated by a living heart pressed close to one in distress. But theories were not answers. And the answer, the real answer, was something science might never be able to measure. Sometimes what medical technology cannot achieve, human connection can. Sometimes the warmth of another living being is the medicine no pharmacy can provide. Sometimes love, in its purest and most innocent form, has power that defies every textbook and clinical trial. Vincent recovered slowly over the following weeks, relearning how to sit up without assistance, how to speak without his words slurring together, how to hold a cup, how to walk with support. Every small victory celebrated, every setback weathered, but every evening, without fail, he asked about the child, about Amara. How was her fever? Had it broken? Was she healthy? Was she happy? Was her mother being taken care of? Nadia tried to maintain professional distance, tried to simply do her job and be grateful that Vincent was alive. But distance was impossible. Her daughter had performed a miracle, and Vincent Ashford knew it. One evening, 3 weeks into his recovery, Vincent asked his father to tell him everything, about the coma, about the prognosis, about the moment he woke up. Richard recounted it all, his voice still catching on certain details. The emptiness of the mansion, the parade of specialists who had offered no hope, Dr. Morrison's recommendation to let him go, the moment they found Amara sleeping on his chest. "I was lost," Vincent said quietly when his father finished, his voice stronger now but still carrying the roughness of recovery. "I was so far away, I could not find my way back. Everything was dark, empty, and then I felt something, warmth, a heartbeat that was not mine, something pure and innocent and alive. It was like a light in the darkness, and I followed it home." Richard wept openly at those words, at the idea that his son had been aware somehow, trapped somewhere, and that a child's presence had been the beacon that guided him back. "What she gave me," Vincent continued, "what her mother gave me, by caring for me all those months, I can never repay that." But Vincent Ashford was a man who had built an empire on solving problems, on finding ways to connect people across impossible distances, and though his body was weak, his mind was remembering how to move at the speed that had always defined him. When Vincent was finally strong enough to leave his bed, walking with the support of a cane and his father's arm, the first place he asked to go was the cottage where Nadia and Amara lived. Richard drove him there in a golf cart, the short distance still too far for Vincent to walk unaided. They pulled up to the small structure as the sun was setting, golden light painting everything warm. Vincent knocked gently, leaning heavily on the cane that would support him for months to come. Each small movement still required conscious thought, his body relearning commands his brain had forgotten how to send. Amara answered, fully recovered, her bright eyes widening at the sight of the man she had slept beside. "You are awake," she exclaimed with the matter-of-fact delight of children who accept miracles as unremarkable. "I knew you were just tired." Vincent lowered himself carefully to one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. The movement cost him significant effort, his balance still precarious, his muscles still weak, but he needed to be at her height for this. Nadia appeared in the doorway behind Amara, her expression uncertain, grateful and terrified in equal measure, uncertain what this visit meant. "Thank you," Vincent said simply, his voice thick with emotion he did not try to hide, his eyes on Amara. "Thank you for staying with me, so I was not alone." Amara smiled, the innocent, radiant smile of a child who had no idea she had done anything extraordinary. Then she wrapped her small arms around Vincent's neck in a hug that nearly toppled him, his recovering balance still fragile. Vincent held her gently, this tiny child who had given him back his life, and felt tears streaming down his face, tears the doctors had told him he might never cry again, tears that proved he was alive, fully, completely, miraculously alive. Richard watched from a few feet away, his own eyes wet, and Nadia stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, witnessing the impossible gratitude of a man returned from the edge of death by her daughter's innocent presence. When Amara finally released him, Vincent reached into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Nadia. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a document, a deed to the cottage, and a letter of endowment establishing a trust fund for Amara's education and future. "You gave me a chance 2 years ago when I had nothing," Nadia whispered, tears falling freely. "And you are giving me another one now." Vincent shook his head slowly. "You gave me my life," he said. "Both of you. This does not come close to repaying that, but it is a start." 3 months after Vincent Ashford opened his eyes for the first time in 18 months, he stood before a room full of journalists, his recovery the subject of international medical fascination. Beside him sat Dr. Patricia Morrison, who had published a preliminary paper on his case that was causing upheaval in neuroscience departments worldwide. But Vincent was not there to discuss neuroplasticity or unprecedented recovery patterns or any of the medical theories attempting to explain what had happened to him. He was there to announce something else entirely. "The Amara Foundation," he said, his voice clear and strong now, projected through speakers to the packed conference room. "A charitable organization dedicated to supporting single mothers and their children with housing, healthcare, and education, funded entirely from my personal assets. Its mission is to provide the kind of chance I once gave to a woman who needed it, multiplied across thousands of families who deserve the same opportunity." He gestured to Nadia and Amara, seated in the front row. Nadia in a simple dress, uncomfortable with the attention. Amara in her favorite purple outfit, swinging her legs and waving at the cameras. "Science will debate what brought me back," Vincent continued. "Medical journals will publish theories. Neurologists will study the case for years. But I know the truth. It was not just medicine. It was not just luck. It was love. The kind of pure, uncomplicated love a child gives without condition. The kind of dedication a mother shows when she protects what matters most to her. These things, they are more powerful than we give them credit for." The room was silent, except for the clicking of cameras. Reporters who had come expecting a medical story were getting something else entirely. Something human. Something that transcended science and data and clinical analysis. "What happened to me cannot be replicated in a laboratory," Vincent said. "Cannot be reduced to a procedure or a treatment protocol. But it can teach us something. It can remind us that sometimes the most sophisticated technology in the world is no match for simple human connection, for presence, for warmth, for the beating heart of another person who refuses to let you face the darkness alone." Amara waved at him from the front row, unimpressed by the cameras and the crowd and the weight of the moment, just happy to see her friend. Vincent waved back, his smile genuine in a way it had never quite been before the accident, before the darkness, before a feverish child taught him what it meant to be truly alive. Richard Ashford stood at the back of the room, finally allowing himself to breathe fully for the first time in 18 months. His son was home, changed in some ways, forever marked by the experience, but home, and the silence that had haunted the estate for so long had finally, mercifully, lifted. In its place was something fragile and precious. Hope, rebuilt not by machines or money or medical intervention, but by the warmth of a child's heartbeat and the unwavering faith that love, in its purest form, can reach into the darkest places and light the way home. The story would be told for years to come, analyzed in medical journals, debated in neuroscience conferences, studied as an outlier, an anomaly, a case that defied conventional understanding of coma recovery and brain trauma. But for Vincent Ashford, the only truth that mattered was simple. He had been lost in darkness, trapped in a place where medicine could not reach him, and a little girl, innocent and feverish and seeking comfort, had crawled onto his chest and refused to let him be alone. Her warmth had been a beacon, her heartbeat a rhythm he could follow, her presence a light in the void. She had not meant to save him, had not understood what she was doing, had simply been a sick child seeking comfort beside someone who looked tired. But in that accidental intimacy, in that unconscious connection, something had shifted. Some barrier between life and death had thinned enough for Vincent to find his way back. Science might never fully explain it, might never be able to recreate the conditions or identify the mechanism, but that was okay. Because some truths do not need scientific validation. Some miracles are meant to remain mysteries. And as Vincent watched Amara wave at him from the audience, her smile bright and unself-conscious, he understood something profound. The greatest technology he had ever developed had connected people across distances, but the greatest connection he had ever experienced had happened at a distance of zero, heart to heart, life to life, human to human. That connection had saved him, and now, through the foundation bearing Amara's name, he would spend the rest of his life making sure other children and their mothers had the same chance at hope that Nadia had been given, that Amara had unconsciously provided, that Vincent himself had received in his darkest hour, because in the end, that is what life is about. Not the empires we build or the wealth we accumulate, but the chances we give, the connections we make, the warmth we share when someone is cold and lost and alone in the dark. Sometimes a miracle looks like a child curling up beside a dying man and whispering, "So you are not alone." Sometimes medicine looks like presence. Sometimes the difference between life and death is measured not in medications or procedures, but in the simple, profound act of refusing to let someone fade away without fighting for them. Vincent Ashford had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, had been given a second chance at life by the smallest, most unexpected source. And he would spend every day of that second chance honoring the gift he had been given, not just by Amara, but by Nadia, who had cared for him when there was no hope, by his father, who had refused to give up, by Dr. Morrison, who had the humility to admit that science does not have all the answers, by every person who had believed, against all evidence, that he might find his way back. He had been dead in every way that mattered, and love, in its purest and most innocent form, had brought him back to life. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories that remind us what truly matters in this life. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time someone gave you a second chance, or a time when you gave one. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in miracles today, because these stories matter, and this community we are building together, it matters too. Every week I bring you stories that will move you, challenge you, remind you of the power we all have to change lives through simple acts of kindness, through being present, through refusing to give up on people, even when the world tells us to. You are part of something bigger here, a community that believes in hope, in second chances, in the inexplicable power of human connection. So subscribe, engage, share, and let's keep spreading these reminders that miracles happen, sometimes in the most unexpected ways, sometimes through the smallest hands, sometimes in the space between heartbeats where life and death touch and love refuses to accept the boundary between them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you never know when your presence, your warmth, your simple act of staying beside someone might be the light that guides them home.